Hey, everybody. All right, I'm standing between you and drinks. This better be good, right? I'm going to start my story with something that happened when I was 4 years old. My mother almost died. I was born into a middle-class family. As you can see here, my parents used to cut my hair with a cereal bowl. Mom and Dad loved each other. They were amazing. And when I was 4, we moved into this house that had a carbon monoxide gas leak. And my mom begins to die as she fixes up the basement. On New Year's Day, she walks across the bedroom, my parents' bedroom. She collapses unconscious. We take her to the hospital, and they find that she has been poisoned over time with carbon monoxide. She doesn't die, thankfully, but her immune system is irreparably destroyed from this point on, and she becomes allergic to every single thing in the world, it seems. Soap makes her sick, car fumes make her sick, and she begins to wear charcoal masks. She has to live outside. When she's inside, she lives in a room that's covered in tinfoil on cot that had been washed 25 times in baking soda. So it was a really bizarre upbringing. I was an only child because family planning stopped after this, and I grew up taking care of Mom. My parents had a very deep Christian faith, so they decided not to sue the gas company for gross negligence. People thought they were crazy. This gas company had poisoned my mom, but they didn't want to become bitter. They believed something good would happen out of this eventually. So I grew up a really good kid. I was active in the church. I was taking care of Mom. I didn't smoke. I didn't drink. I didn't have sex. I didn't do anything wrong until the age of 18. And then I moved to New York City, and I found out about clubs. And I found out that if you wanted to rebel, you could rebel in style by becoming a nightclub promoter. And if you could get the right people inside these nightclubs, you could charge them ridiculous amounts for alcohol. So there goes the next 10 years of my life. Here's a picture 10 years later in some VIP club. And what is so sad about this photo is the Rolex watch I am pretentiously showing to some nightclub promoter to show that I have an expensive watch. This was my business partner. We were successful. We were getting paid $4,000 a month by Bacardi just to be seen drinking Bacardi in public. Budweiser paid us another $4,000 a month to drink Bud beer in public. But it was much, much darker, somewhere around noon the next day in some seedy after hours. At 28, I had a smoking problem, a gambling problem, a drinking problem, a cocaine problem, an ecstasy problem, a pornography problem, and a strip club problem. Everything short of heroin. And thankfully, I realized that if I continued down this path, I would probably die before the age of 40. I was on a trip to South America. We had rented this amazing house with servants and with horses, and my girlfriend was on the cover of magazines and on billboards, and I drove a BMW. I had a Labrador Retriever, everything I thought would make me happy. I realized I was morally bankrupt, I was spiritually bankrupt, I was emotionally bankrupt, and I needed to make a huge change in my life. So I began to rediscover a very lost Christian faith as a kid, and I became really interested in service to the poor. Not in the hypocrisy that I'd grown up with a little bit, but in what would it look like to actually serve others instead of myself, instead of getting drunk every night. So I sell everything that I own. I put my DVD collection up on eBay in a lot, 2,000 DVDs. And I start applying to the famous humanitarian organizations in the world. No one will take me. They're like, what do you do again? Nightclubs, how would you be useful to us? We're serious people solving world problems. So no one will take me except one organization finally writes back and said that if I was willing to go to a country called Liberia, and if I was willing to pay them $500 every month, I could volunteer. So I give them my credit card details, and I join this amazing mission in Liberia. I begin to live on a hospital ship. Some of you may have heard of this group. For 25 years, they've sailed hospital ships up and down the coast of Africa, bringing the very best doctors in the world to people who need access to medical care. So I dust off a journalism degree, and said, look, I know 15,000 people that I've been getting drunk for a decade. I can tell them a new story. Maybe I can get them involved in giving. So I land in Liberia, I jump off the ship, I grab my cameras, and I learn what this country is really like. No running water, no sewage, no mail, no electricity. Charles Taylor had devastated this country after 14 years of civil war. People were living in houses that actually once used to be beautiful and were completely ruined. What I was there to do was a bit shocking to me. We would flyer the country and we would look for patients with massive facial deformity. People who had tumors, people who had cleft lips, people who had flesh-eating disease, people who were burned during the war. My third day on the mission, I was so excited. Who would turn up? Would anyone actually come? I knew we had 1,500 available surgery slots. And at 5:30 in the morning, I jump in a Land Rover and I turn up at the football stadium that the government has given us, and there are 5,000 people standing outside. And this was one of those moments for me. I realized over 3,000 people were going to be sent home. People who had come with hope. People who had come from neighboring countries, some who had walked a month, because we didn't have enough doctors. We didn't have enough resources. First child in line was this boy named Alfred. He was a 14-year-old suffocating to death on his own face with a benign tumor. His mom is with him. She pulls out this photo and says, 4 years ago, my boy was fine. But a tumor started growing. There was no doctor, no surgeon to take him to, and here he is now. So I run in the corner, I start crying, like I don't think I can do a year of this. If this is my job, taking pictures of patients up close. But I learned that we were actually there to help, and we were making a difference in the lives of kids like Alfred. So I pulled it together, I got through 2 days, I took the screening photos of 1,500 patients, and then a couple days later I scrubbed up, and I watched these amazing doctors from the UK and from Germany remove Alfred's tumor. And then I got to take him home a week later, without his tumor, and see this huge celebration as he was welcomed back into his family, and I got to watch him heal. It was an amazing experience. Every day was like this. I would wake up in the morning, I would go down on the ward, I would meet the patients of the day. This woman named Marthaline, she told me that if she was seen outside without this towel covering her face, people would stone her. They would hurl rocks at her because they thought that she was cursed. And she needed a 40-minute surgery to just give her face and her life back. It was a life-changing experience. Took 50,000 photos that first year. And I'm emailing my 15,000 friends back in nightlife. As you can imagine, my list gets a little smaller. People are like, unsubscribe me from this, bro. I signed up for that cool party you did once, but not like leprosy or tumors. But other people began to give, and I realized the power of sharing images in real time, of sharing stories, of inviting people to actually make a difference. So I sign up for a second tour of duty. I go back to Liberia for another year, and I get deeper and deeper into the villages, and I see that people are drinking dirty water. I was selling $10 bottles of Voss water to people in nightclubs that wouldn't even open them. I learned that 50% of the country was drinking from swamps and from ponds and from rivers. I met this 13-year-old girl named Hawa and realized this was the only water she'd known her entire life for drinking, for bathing, and began to make the link between the sickness that we were seeing, the thousands of people coming to see our doctors, and the disease that was being spread by dirty water through these villages. I came back to New York 2 years later, completely changed. I'd quit every single one of my vices. All right, I drink a little bit, but I never smoked again. I never touched coke again, never gambled again, never looked at porn. I quit everything and began to invite my friends into a new story, began to invite them to help. And I was extremely passionate about water. So I got the idea to start Charity Water. Maybe I could turn what I had learned in 10 years of promoting and getting people wasted every night into serving the poor. So I started learning about water. I'll tell you what I found. 663 million people today do not have the thing most of us take for granted every single day, the thing that comes out of taps, the things that comes out of our showers. thing we even drink in bottles. And if you are one of these 663 million people, it looks like this. It is not pretty. There's a kid named John Bosco in Rwanda who was drinking from a swamp his whole life. There's a community in Ethiopia sharing the water with their cattle. Kids and cows drinking the same sources of water in Ethiopia. I began to learn about all the diseases associated with bad water. When you drink water like this girl from a river, it's not good for you. You've all heard of cholera, you've heard of E. coli, you've heard of these diseases. 52% of all the disease throughout the developing world is because people are drinking bad water and they don't have toilets. So imagine that. I'm sure there's people in this room that are interested in bringing health to people. Half of the sick people are sick because they don't have their most basic need met. I'd never heard of the disease, or I'd never heard of schistosoma before. Very fancy word for parasites or worms that infect over 100 million people today. This is what it looks like. Kids that are drinking water with schistosome in it. This child was actually throwing up every time she would drink from this bottle that came from the Molo River in Kenya. We put this bottle under a microscope after we took it away from the child. And the lab at Rockefeller University made us this video. I remember in their diagnosis, they said, we don't know all the different kinds of amoebas and parasites, but you definitely sent us water that is alive. No child should be drinking water that looks like this. I was passionate about education. I learned that half of the world's schools didn't have clean water or toilets. Imagine that. Imagine sending your kids or your brothers and sisters to a school with no toilets and no water. Teenage girls will drop out of school. They get their period, they stay home 4 or 5 days every month because there's no toilet, there's no water. And then they spend the rest of their days walking with 40 pounds or 20 liters of dirty water on their back. Not okay. It affects women the most deeply. Unfortunately, men don't have anything to do with water. It's always the job of the women to go and carry the water. And we see women in the most undignified situations around the world, digging in sandy riverbeds, trying to find water. This woman told me that the only other option in her village was a river where people were killed by crocodiles. I walked over to the river, saw a couple people getting water. Story that has impacted me the most deeply over the last 10 years since starting the organization. It's the story of a girl named Letta Kiros. I've been to Ethiopia 27 times now, and on a recent trip, I was staying in a really crappy $4 a night hotel. Then I'm in the little restaurant, and the owner comes out, recognizes me, knew the work Charity Water was doing, and says, "Let me tell you a story about water." Sits down and says, "Many years ago in my village, there was a woman named Letta Kiros who walked 8 hours a day. And she would have a clay pot on her back. Said one day she walks back into our village and she slips and falls before she reaches home. She breaks her clay pot, all the water spills out. He says she doesn't go back and get more water. She doesn't go home. She takes a rope and she hangs herself from a tree in the village. He said we found her body swinging there. I didn't believe the story was true. Tell the foreign donor a shocking story, make him feel good about the work. So I sent our local partners out to this village. They confirmed that Letta Kiros Hailu had lived there and had committed suicide. And then a little bit ago, I asked my wife for a pass. I said, I need to go and live in this village. I need to understand what her life was like. I need to walk in her footsteps. So I flew back to Ethiopia. I flew up to the north. I drove 5 hours from the regional city to where the road ended. Then I had to hire a donkey and a camel, put my backpack on it, and then I had to hike 9 hours to reach her village over the mountains. I find 2,800 people living there. I met her mom the next morning, and her mom says nothing has changed since her death years ago. People are still going to the same spot for water. So she sends me to see her best friend that worked with her that day, that walked. Her friend said, here were the clay pots we used to use in the rope. And thankfully, the clay pots have been replaced now by these yellow jerry cans. So they weigh a little less. They're more resilient. But we're still walking to the same source for water. So the town, Maida, is on top of a plateau, and the water's at the very bottom after this treacherous descent. I walk down, I find a long line of jerry cans as people are queued up waiting. And as if it wasn't bad enough to walk to the bottom of a ravine, then you have to wait. And it would take 30 minutes to fill up 20 liters from this little seepage. The other option is a river much, much farther away. They took me up, they showed me the church where she was buried and given her funeral, said over 2,000 people came to attend it, and then they showed me her grave, this little pile of rocks behind the church. So I didn't know this until I spent the week in the village. She was 13 at the time of her death. They took me to the tree where they found her body. I've seen a lot over 10 years, but I came back fired up. No 13-year-old girl, regardless of the conditions she's born into, should be walking 8 hours with dirty water and tying a rope around her neck and jumping from a tree because she spilled her water and felt shame, her friend told me, that she'd let her family down. Her family needed that water to cook dinner, and that was a valuable asset of the family. It cost a few dollars to replace the pot. So for me, the water crisis wasn't about numbers and statistics, 663 million faceless people. It was about 13-year-old girls named Leta Kiros, and I thought maybe I could help. I learned this was a completely solvable problem. There is not a single person on this planet that should drink dirty water today. No one needs to drink dirty water. There is no cure that we are waiting for in some lab 10 or 20 years in the future. We know how to bring clean water to everyone on the planet. There's not a will to do it. There is not the money. But there's no mystery. A lot of different things work. Sometimes the terrible irony is that these rural communities are living on top of clean water, but they don't have the resources to tap into it. Sometimes you can't drill. Sometimes you can build a rainwater system or cap a mountain spring and use gravity to take it down. Sometimes you can filter water at the household level or at the community level. At its most simplest, it's about $10,000 to drill a well. And it's amazing. The community doesn't have access to $1 million of rigs, compressors, and trucks, but they will contribute the labor. This community built this road over 3 months. Every household sending one person to do the labor. Local hydrologists and drillers jump out. A few days later, clean water shoots into the sky. One of the most amazing things to be a part of. This never, ever gets old. Incredible celebrations, people laughing, people dancing, people clapping. Having done this for years now, as we go back to these communities, many of them describe the history of their village as before the water came and after the water came. And we've said for years, water changes everything. It impacts the health. Obviously, if kids are drinking clean water and not water with leeches or parasites, they're healthier. It impacts education. If kids have clean water at their schools, if they're not walking hours every day, they're better students. Impacts women. Women get time back in their day. Imagine getting 5 hours back every day, 7 days a week. We hear incredible stories of women starting small businesses, selling rice at the market, selling peanuts. I was in Zimbabwe and Zambia a few weeks ago. A woman told me she was selling rugs. Showed me the rugs that she'd been making now that she had extra time and she had a water point in her village. Some women just say we're better moms. We spend more time with our families now. This amazing woman, Helen, in Uganda, told us that for the first time in her life, she felt beautiful. Because after the water came in, she had enough water to wash her face and her clothes. And as a mom of two and with a husband, she said, I always gave my family the water. I washed my kids' clothes. I washed their bodies. I let my husband wash his clothes. I never used the water for me until there was a water point in my village and I finally had enough. Water was a very, very powerful way to alleviate suffering, to lift people out of extreme poverty. There's data that's come out of the United Nations now proving the economic impact of providing water. Water makes people healthier. It also makes them wealthier. Every dollar, every pound, every euro invested in water and sanitation makes a community 4 to 8 times richer. And what I loved about the issue personally was I thought maybe it was one of the few things on earth that everybody could agree on. Throughout this room, I'm sure you have different political opinions. You would have different religious backgrounds. You'd be from different countries. But I don't think anyone that is in this room wants that kid to drink from a swamp, wants a child to drink water that could kill her any day. So I started the org 10 years ago to try to do something about it. I was 30, I was broke because I'd given all my money to Mercy Ships and I was living on a buddy's closet floor. This was ground zero. And my old club promoter friend said, you can use my couch and you can start here. I was running around telling everybody I wanted to try to see an end to the water crisis in my lifetime and create a world where my kids never had a speaker like me roll up to their elementary school and show them those photos. If I couldn't do it in my kids' lifetime, maybe my grandkids' lifetime. But as I started talking to my friends, I realized this wouldn't be that simple because my friends didn't want to give to charity. So I realized we would also have to try to reinvent charity, reinvent the way people experienced and the way they thought of charity. Here's the biggest problem. People do not trust charities. Where I come from in America, we have this wonderful cultural heritage of generosity. Americans are generous. We pay lower taxes. We give. Yet, 42% of the people distrust charities. So you're an entrepreneur trying to solve a problem. What if you could get 42% of the people who should be giving, who actually want to be giving, to trust again? Here in Britain, there was a study recently that said people would give an extra 665 million pounds if organizations simply provided more information about how money is spent and evidence of impact. Guys, this sounds so simple. And people really want to give. Just yesterday, one of our colleagues was in a cab. She was telling them about Charity Water coming to the UK. Her fare was 14 pounds. The cab driver slips 20 pounds back to her because he believed he could trust. So I wanted to try and solve this through a new business model. I wanted to figure out a way where 100% of every dollar we would ever take from the public would go directly to help people get clean water, would go directly to fund water projects. I opened up 2 bank accounts, said they will never touch each other, they will be audited separately, and we'll be so extreme about the 100% model, we will pay back credit card fees. So if someone gave $100 and Amex took 3%, we would separately raise that $3 and we'd send every penny to the field. Somehow, I would figure out how to brand overhead and make it cool for a very small group of people. We did this by developing a multi-year giving program called The Well. And we enlisted some of the most amazing people in technology, founders of companies, saying, will you help pay for the staff and the overhead and the office so that we can go to the public with a very pure model? And one by one, 110 families joined us over the years. 100 families throughout America, and you can see how big Silicon Valley is. And now 11 in Europe. That allowed us to give every penny from the public to projects. Because money wasn't fungible, we said, let's just prove impact. Let's show people where the projects are, and let's use technology to do that. So we were fortunate. We started the same year as Google Earth, Google Maps. We said, let's put every water point up for everybody to see it. That's true 10 years later. Any one of you can go to a sporting goods store, buy a handheld GPS unit for maybe 30 or 40 bucks now, and go visit every project. Third thing I wanted to do was build a beautiful brand. As I looked at charities, I was not inspired by their design, by their branding, by their marketing. There's a lot of guilt and shame. There was a lot of kids with flies on their face in slow motion, locking eyes with a television viewer. Nick Kristof had written in the New York Times that people peddle toothpaste with far more sophistication than all the world's life-saving causes. It's completely broken. You guys know this. You don't need a lot of money to build a brand. You need good taste. You need to care. You need to hire talented designers. You need to pay attention to detail in the way that you present things. Most important thing in the business model was what we wouldn't do. We would not send Westerners to Africa or to India or to Asia. We would work through local partners. We would identify the amazing local organizations on the ground that were helping their communities move forward through water and sanitation, and we would build their organizations. We would buy them more drilling rigs. We would help them hire more hydrologists. So it wouldn't be us going over there. It'd be us raising the awareness and the money. So in a local context, Ethiopians could lead the people of Ethiopia forward. People of Bangladesh could lead the people of Bangladesh forward. So that was the business model. It was simple. Use every penny of the public's money to projects, prove it, build a beautiful brand, and work through locals. Started with a birthday party. I wish that I was more creative, but the only thing I could think of to get this started was to throw a party in a nightclub. I tricked my friends to come by giving them open bar for an hour. And on the way in, I said, you have to donate $20, everybody. We raised $15,000, and this time, instead of pocketing 15 grand cash, we took every penny to northern Uganda to a refugee camp, and we did our first few projects. And then we sent the photo and the GPS proof back to every single person that attended. People were blown away that a charity had told them where $20 went. And we said, this is a very simple, powerful idea. Tell people what you did with their money. Inspire them, and they will continue to be generous. We thought social was the way these movements would grow in the future. We thought mailing people paper was stupid. Buying physical mailing addresses, sending them calendars, asking for checks in the mail, this wasn't the future. We were the first charity in the world to get 1 million Twitter followers. We're the first charity in the world to use Instagram. And we always look for ways to celebrate the diversity of our community around the world. Show the things that people were doing to raise awareness and to raise money. We partnered creatively with brands. We got a brand called Saks Fifth Avenue to shoot their catalogs in water for 2 seasons to give us the windows of their flagship store on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. And then tell their employees about the water crisis and ask people to help. They raised $700,000. Made it look easy. The Macallan came to us after that and said, there's a lot of water in the making of whiskey. What could we do? They got an idea to take a 64-year-old Macallan on a global road trip, and if people wanted to taste it, they had to drop at least $5,000. We're like, you people have lost your mind. You've been drinking too much Macallan. No one is going to pay you $5,000 for 10 centiliters for like a tiny taste, no matter how old this thing is. Obviously, they knew their audience better. That single bottle raised $600,005. Depeche Mode took us on a world tour, raised over $1.4 million, raising awareness among their fans. Always looking for ways to be creative and tell the story. The movement, though, has been powered by everyday people, and that's what I'm so proud of. We got lucky early on, and we stumbled upon this idea of asking people to donate their birthday. It was our 1-year anniversary. I was done with the clubs, and I thought, man, I don't need anything for my birthday. Certainly don't need a party to celebrate me. I don't need a wallet. I don't need socks. I don't need a tie. I don't need a gift card. What if I asked every single person I knew to donate $32 for my 32nd birthday? And 100% of the money would go, and they could see where it had gone. So I just email everybody I know, and I raised $59,000. I'm like, wow, this is a big idea. Nobody needs more crap. Everybody has a birthday every year. This 7-year-old kid in Texas donates his 7th birthday, starts knocking on doors in his neighborhood, raises $22,000. And this starts spreading. It was an easy thing to do. Tony Hawk, couple Instagram posts, raised $20,000. Jack Dorsey gives up 3 birthdays, almost raising $200,000. Daniel Ek gives up his 29th, raises $45,000. Angela Ahrens, who used to be here at Burberry, is now at Apple, sends out 1 email, is celebrated by her friends and her business community, raises over $101,000. Will and Jada Smith in Hollywood give up their birthdays. actually come with me to see the impact that they'd made. So all that was cool, but what was most exciting was not tech CEOs or founders or Hollywood celebrities. It was 6-year-olds like Lori doing a little bit. It was 16-year-olds in the middle of the country or 89-year-olds like Nona Ween. I loved her mission statement. She realizes that she has double the life expectancy of so many of these places where we work simply because of the privilege she was born into. And if her birthday could help other people have more birthdays, then that was worth donating her 89th. Some people said, I have another idea. Let me go climb a mountain and try to raise $1 a foot. We had skydivers for Charity Water. This guy, do you know this band Nickelback? This guy Jesse gets the idea to subject himself to 168 consecutive hours of Nickelback. Even at night, he went to sleep with headphones. He's rewarded $36,000 of sympathy from people that he knew and people on the radio. These guys sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. This guy proposed to his wife by buying a well instead of a ring. Cosette is 4 years old, has been painting for Charity Water. She now has a backlog of requests. She cannot keep up. Raised over $5,000. Maddie is in Vancouver, has done 12 lemonade stands. Her mom said one of them was in the rain. And at her last lemonade stand, she convinces a local band to perform on the sidewalk next to her lemonade stand to attract buyers. She raises over $5,300. So this was it. It was the everyday group of people bringing the best of themselves, their birthdays, their donations, their creativity, their lemonade stands, their painting. And we became very, very intentional early on about telling it as their story. This was not the Charity Water show. This was not the Scott Harrison show. This was a story of our beneficiaries, of our local partners, of our volunteers, of our donors, of our fundraisers. And we would take a back seat and we would focus very hard on stewardship and accountability and inspiring those supporters to see that they actually had made a difference. So we focused on transparency and innovation, building online products that could track every single dollar down to the photo and the GPS of the project it funded. We started funding drilling rigs by crowdsourcing them, and we mounted GPS units to our rigs so people could track them in real time. They even tweet their location, our rigs. Recently, we're very passionate about ensuring the sustainability of our projects around the world using technology. We pitched Google this crazy idea. We said, we now have 19,000 projects. We know they're all built. We know where they all are. We want to know they're working over time. So could we please have $5 million to try to go build a sensor? Google awarded us a $5 million grant, largest check they had ever written in the history of the company at that time. And we began to work with 20 different labs to develop a remote water sensor, specifically for the African hand-dug well and the drilled well. We began installing 1,000 late last year. And not only is this the right thing to do, so we know that these projects are not broken and they're working over time, but it's an amazing donor experience. I can go back to Daniel Eck and say, your 29th birthday, 4 years ago, funded a bunch of projects. Let's go look at one. Let's zoom in on the village at Bel S3. There are 250 people living there. You got to see your little name on a plaque with your friends. Now I can tell them how much water is flowing 4 years later. I can say that last Thursday, women got up around 4 in the morning in pitch black and started getting their first liters of clean water. And then in the heat of the day, there was no activity, and then there was an afternoon rush. And last Thursday, it pumped 2,329 liters of clean water. Just imagine for a sec, put that in our dollar terms. Imagine buying 2,329 1-liter bottles today and tomorrow and the next day and doing that for 4 years. That's the value of one of his $10,000 birthday campaigns. We're really excited about virtual reality. I've taken only 300 people personally to the field, but we've had over 1 million supporters now. So we said, what if we could shoot a film in VR and get people a little closer, get them inside the story? So we taped a bunch of GoPros together, we made a rig last May, and we made a film called The Source, which is 8 minutes long. It follows the story of a 13-year-old girl named Salam over the 6 days when her entire life changes because of clean water. The first day you put on the headset and you are there with her at the swamp and you are watching her collect water that you would never give your dogs, let alone drink or give to your children. And by the end of it, you see her life is completely changed. So we had this film and I wanted to show it to people, but I thought she had to go see it first. So before we took it to the Metropolitan Museum at our gala, and we strapped headsets on 400 people and asked them to go to Ethiopia at the exact same time for 8 minutes. And then when they took the headsets down, they gave $2.4 million and helped another 240 villages. Just before this, we took it into Ethiopia and we showed her, and we got permission. And we showed her how we had treated those 6 days. And we said, Salam, your film is going to inspire millions of people to be generous. It's going to get them a little closer to this problem thousands of miles from now. And you're going to help a lot of people through your story. We've now been taking it out on the streets of New York City, stopping 13-year-olds in rollerblades saying, hey, you want to check out a story of a 13-year-old girl living in Ethiopia who didn't grow up in the same situation as you? Started taking it to film festivals, and now we're taking it to huge outdoor spaces, building VR kiosks that are manned by volunteers so people can see. A lot of things have worked in 9 years. The business model was different. This idea of putting our supporter first and inspiring them and connecting them has worked. It's led to over $210 million of donations from 1 million people globally. It's not how we keep score, it's what we can do with that. And we've been able to help over 6.1 million people now across 24 countries get clean water to drink. Right now, we employ over 1,600 locals who are getting up every day and moving their communities forward. And this year's goal is to help 1 million people in 2016 alone, which works out to 2,739 people every single day of the year. So today, 2,739 people will get clean water, and tomorrow, one person every 30 seconds. So we say to people who are paralyzed by these big issues, you turn on the TV and it seems like just another horrible thing is happening in the world. We believe the world is getting better. We believe these problems are being solved. And we need to keep inviting more people to shake off that apathy, trust again, and be generous. As we look ahead, we've solved about 1% of the global problems, so we're at the very beginning of this journey. And over the next 10 years, we want to make a much bigger impact. 19,000 villages, that's great. 6 million people fills up a lot of stadiums. But there are so many people out there today that continue to need our help. So I'll pose the question to you. What are you doing for others? What are you doing with your business? What are you doing with your money? Are you tackling any of these problems? Do you just turn off the TV? Every single one of you in this room can make a huge, huge impact on people who are suffering. Maybe it's not our issue, maybe it's others. But if a nightclub promoter can do it, that was a frigging drunk, addicted to cocaine, you're all way ahead of me in this room, I'm sure. If you want to know how you could help us, there are basically 3 ways. Maybe there's some people or some companies in this room that could fund an entire water project. My wife and I are on a nonprofit salary, but we do at least one of these every single year because we believe it is one of the best ways to invest $10,000. And this is what happens. You take a kid like John Bosco, who was drinking from a swamp, along with his entire family, and then because someone is generous and decides I could do something maybe about one person or one village, rigs start rolling towards his village, they turn off the road, local guys jump out, start drilling, they find water, and less than a week later, clean water is flowing for the first time in a village. And John Bosco is drinking clean water for the first time in his life. 2, maybe you guys can't do this. Maybe some of you could give a little something. As the organization turns 10, one of the biggest challenges, one of my biggest regrets as a founder is that I never built any sort of sustainable donation revenue. We had 1 million people come and give and be generous. We had a lot of people do one birthday and have a great experience, but we didn't do it month after month. So we're building a brand new subscription program at the moment. For $30, for 20 pounds, for 25 euros, every single month you could give someone clean water. And our team is trying to innovate on what that looks like in the future. How could we inspire you every single month? How could we connect you to these stories of impact? You could actually give as little as $1 a month to be a part of this. That's probably something everybody in this room could do. Imagine if 700 people actually did give $30 a month every single month just because of this room. 700 people get clean water every single month. And the third thing is something we've been working on in the UK with David Goldberg of the Founders Pledge. And we have a bunch of founders that are saying, I actually don't have any money now. I can't do it well. I can't help, but I could pledge a little bit of my equity. And there are founders now throughout the UK that have picked us and other causes, not just in the UK and Europe. Now there's over $110 million of equity that is being pledged. So as you guys build your businesses and maybe one day exit, you know that would actually have at least a 2% impact on a cause that you care about, whether it's ours or others. So you guys could fund a well, you could give a little something monthly. If you're interested in this, you could reach out to me. I'm scott@charitywater.org, or learn more about the Founders Pledge. And I'll leave you just with a quote that really has kept me going over 10 years. I came across it many years ago. And it was a rabbi, a Jewish rabbi, like 200 or 300 AD, said, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? We are living in the most remarkable time in history. If there's ever a time when these huge problems can be served, it is certainly today, more than a year ago, more than 10 years ago, more than 100 years ago. Thank you guys for letting me close and for your time.